The
illustrious Jabba bids you welcome. I'm going to regret this.
I'm Pete Mitchell. He's Peyton Jones. And this is the Church Planter Podcast, brought to you by Church Planter Magazine. Hey, Church Planter, this is Pete Mitchell.
And this is Peyton Jones.
And unfortunately for you, you're listening to the Church Planter Podcast, where right before this particular episode, we were discussing all things Batman, of course.
We were, yeah. And Pete was saying, I think the Adam West Batman film was the best. Pete, I'm going to let you elaborate on that a bit.
That's... I just remember at the very end, Robin, I think we should leave through the window. Do you remember that? They leave through the window and rappel down the side of the building.
Yes.
How
did they do that? It looks so real.
See, what brought this up, everybody, is Peyton. I was in my head, I was playing 6 Degrees of Separation, and I was trying to get everything back to the subject of Batman. So in my head, I was like, oh, this will actually be really easy on this podcast because we can go, oh, that's Christian, like Christian Bale, like Batman. In my head, that's where the conversation was going. That's why I said that. And then you're like, I actually didn't like those movies. And that's when I was like, this is why I know you and I have a lot less in common than we think we do.
Yeah, well, then I said, well, actually, I thought they weren't bad, but, they weren't great. And then, they still to date have not made a killer Batman movie. They just haven't.
Oh, my gosh. You know what? This is why I don't trust your movie opinion at all. And now I even understand better why you said, oh, the prequels in Star Wars really did happen. I think they're wonderful.
Hey, man, there were some great things about the prequels.
There was nothing great about the prequels.
Dude, how can you say Ewan McGregor was not a rad Obi-Wan, young Obi-Wan? He was great.
You know
Everything about him was Obi-Wan Kenobi. And just that alone was worth the price of admission to see Ewan McGregor pulling off a young Obi-Wan. He killed that.
That's all I'm saying. You have turned to the dark side. You Sith, you evil, evil Sith.
I'm a Jedi like my father before me.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
So
what you're saying to me, Pete, is I need to go back to the Dagobah system to complete my Jedi training.
Oh my gosh. I don't even know what to say to you. I don't even know why we're friends. I really don't. Sometimes I sit there and I just wonder, why do I even talk to this guy? Why do we even do the things that we do?
This guy is a loser. Welcome to the Church Planter Podcast, everybody, where Pete and I talk some very deep and important things.
Theology of Star Wars and Batman, apparently.
Yeah, so today's topic is actually everything I needed to know about church planting I got from Star Wars. And that is actually our topic because there are some deep, deep places we can go there. It's just... I only announced this topic to people.
Interestingly enough, did you know that 98% of people say that they would attend church if they were invited by a friend?
It's only the second week and I'm already laughing.
I know. You know what's so funny is last week I get an email from our contact and they're like, hey, let us know when our ad's going to air on the podcast. I'm like, it did this morning. So we're already butchering their ad. That's all I'm saying.
Yes. So, no, Pete, I did not know that.
And yet only 2% of churchgoers say they're actively inviting? Were you aware of that? You have to be aware of that statistic.
Well, I did record last week's podcast with you, so I was aware of that. And then I went back to listen because
I'm a pastor, and I know no one invites their friends. I can tell every Sunday morning when I look out over the crowd.
I actually listened to the podcast to see, was it as bad as we actually thought it was? That was my motive for listening.
Was it? Because I couldn't go back and re-listen to it.
It actually wasn't as bad as we thought. Okay. It was, yeah.
Well, see,
this comes back. Maybe I have low standards. This
comes back to how you and I are completely different. So I might still find it.
No, we felt the same. We looked at each other and said, yeah, almost the worst ever.
Well, incidentally, Reach was created to change that stat of 98% of people say they would go if a friend invited them, but yet only 2% of people are actually inviting. And incidentally enough, I did actually go back and clean up our ad last week. I cut out. I don't know if you listened to it, but I cut out some of those parts that I had tried to ad lib and just butchered.
No, I didn't listen, but
yeah. So when they listen again this week, this is actually an improved ad. I know, Brittany, you're listening right now and you're going, I thought we were doing a Reach commercial and we're like 2 minutes later. We still don't have the punchline. It gets better. You have to trust us. It gets better with time. We sent up like hundreds of pastors to MoGive. So I'm telling you, our commercials are worth something. What happened? Where are you going?
Yeah, my train came by and it was really loud. So yes, what Pete said is 100% true.
All right. Well, anyway, incidentally, Peyton, Reach was started to change that stat to give people a better way to invite. Reach equips congregations to invite friends in a powerful and scalable way. For every check-in on Facebook or a tag on Instagram, a donation is made to a kingdom-building cause. More people hear about church from their friends, and more good is done around the world. It's that simple. Reach is offering a special promotion for Church Planter Podcast listeners. That's you guys. To get your first month free. To get started, just visit. I see this. The website always throws me off. Causely. I gotta it's just a word I've never seen before. Well, I don't think it existed before they came up with the domain.
Causely.
Yeah. So
well, you remember it. I mean,
now I gotta read it like 5 times. Causely.com/reach. Sign in. Use the promo code podcast. You guys can get a month free of Reach. So enough of this. Hey, my congregation's not inviting their friends. We just gave you a tool and a month free. There you go.
Absolutely. Don't say we never gave anything to you. And guys, actually, this is one of the biggest deals. Use technology to connect with people. I mean, there's no replacement for organic connection, but this comes first. This is the first thing that people, it's the front line of your communication. Well, it's
kind of like, I remember in one of Michael Cheshire's book, he made the point that the first time someone visits your church is not when they show up on a Sunday. They've already visited the website. They've probably already listened to part of a sermon on a website to see if this is the kind of church that they want to attend. And you are kidding yourselves if you don't think people are checking you out on social media. Like you were literally kidding yourselves.
There's no way someone's going to walk into your church without checking you out.
When was the last time you saw a flip phone? Go on, I'll wait. It's like
well, my mom was still using a flip phone.
Well, and did your mom already have a church?
Yeah, she did.
There you go. So she was already spoken for.
She was going to an Episcopalian church.
Was she really?
She was.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So
did she wear a robe too?
She was Methodist before that. So.
Oh, yeah.
She'd been all over.
Yeah, there you go. So, hey.
Mom got around spiritually.
Jeez. So, I don't even know how to take that. I can't even. Your facial expression after just saying that was like, I just said a funny. I'm just going to drop it right there. Bonk. So, tell everyone again what today's topic is.
Yeah. So, today's topic is everything I needed to know about church planning I got from Star Wars.
I'm still in shock that we're doing that as a topic, but cool.
Why? We've done a couple of times we've done a whole Star Wars episode.
Yeah. Well, we did. You know what? when I was listening to some of our older episodes, I went back and listened to number 50. Remember how excited we were when we got to number 50?
Oh, yeah.
And there was like no church planning information on that episode. It was all podcast, all smack talk.
Isn't it about being 50?
Yeah, that's what we called it. The episode about being number 50 or something like that.
Yeah.
But that was the one where I brought up the Principality of Sealand. That was the episode.
That was a great episode.
That was the one. So if you guys haven't listened to it, you should go back and listen to episode 50.
And just so you know, like, we've done Smack Talk since the beginning. I mean, this is just what we do. So if you're listening going, hey, I'm new here. This is like your little spot on that map. I'm new here. Here's where you are. You're in Smack Talk right now. We're getting ready to go into the actual topic. We do this every week. And we explain it every week because we have new people all the time coming in, and we know you guys are like, what in the heck is this? This says the Church Planner Podcast, and this doesn't sound like church planning. So if that's the case, you're probably not a church planner.
So, hey, tell me what's been going on in your life this last week, because we need to do our smack talk before we get into the meat and potatoes.
You know, I have nothing. You don't want to open that can of worms with me.
Really that good, huh?
Yeah, it's not been a bad week, but
that's one of those private calls that we can't air.
Let's just say that I'm still a little bit numb from the emotional fallout of my mom dying.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
That said, it's been different, man.
Well, I can say this, man. I am really excited about shameless plug, the Bivo Inner Circle. Because we actually just today are mailing out to everyone the July newsletter. People got to understand this month's newsletter, I think it's like 36 pages long. So, I mean, it's not like a little 4-page job. There's a lot of incredible insight. And I will say this, my favorite headline for an article ever was written by you for this newsletter. And
really?
is, best headline I've ever read in my life.
What was it?
Don't ask for prayer when what you really want is money.
Yeah.
I was like, that's the greatest headline ever.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
Don't ask for prayer when what you really want is money.
Ask for prayer when you want prayer. Ask for money. And ask unashamedly when you want money. That's okay. It's okay to ask for money. But don't masquerade as I'm really asking for money, but hey, I need your prayer. And then, kind of tag the little ditty in the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not on. People see right through that anyway.
So anyway, the newsletter is awesome. The newsletter is awesome. So what I do
it was good.
I do a whole portion. By the way, I stuck yours in the mail, so you're going to get yours in a couple of days too.
I get it. I actually get it.
I figured you probably should because I know you're never going to read what I write unless I actually.
You know what's funny is I always read your stuff, but
not unless I send it to you. How else would you get it?
I have my ways. Look in your contacts for a man named Nathan Bartholomew. That's me. Just joking.
I was actually looking for Jesse Pinkman, and I found your address.
I so want you to tell that story.
No, I can't.
I can't talk about that.
No, I can't. I genuinely can't.
It's a don't let the left hand know what the right hand is doing kind of thing.
Yeah, and I'm really hoping that they. Anyway, I can't go any further on that story. But anyway, it's a great newsletter because here's what we do, guys. And Peyton actually wrote a great little piece that I'm gonna start running some Facebook ads with it. And what he was talking about is some of the stuff that Paul has done. Or did, I should say, as he was raising up and training up his church planners. So it wasn't just all about ministry, but he also was teaching them a vocation, in his case, making tents. Why don't you tell everyone a little bit about that? I'll segue it over into what we're doing.
Yeah, one of the cool things is that the Apostle Paul, the Bible Inner Circle is really the most first century thing for training church planners, I think, is out there. And it's funny because we talk about the hate mail that Pete gets. Like, people will be like, oh man, why are you scamming me or trying to, train me how to make money? I'm a minister. And we've talked about that before. But the reality is, what if what if you look at the Apostle Paul and you realize that Paul wasn't waiting for people to throw, wadded up dollar bills at his church planners. What he was actually doing was empowering those church planners to be able to go anywhere at any time and do anything. So in other words, when he rolled out his tent making stall booth, whatever his business in the marketplace, to infiltrate a community, to plant the seeds of the gospel, to actually lead to planting a church, what he actually did was he brought his team with him. And remember, he had like 30 something people. I think it was 39, 32. It was 32 people that actually interacted with him and, moved all around Asia Minor, Macedonia, the Mediterranean Sea, and they had skills to pay the bills. And what Paul did is he trained them not only how to plant churches, but he had to train them to make a living when he shot them out all over the map. And so Paul was the first guy to do the Bible, where he trained them in a skill, tent making. And I've got other examples of this. There's another book called Stacking the Deck, where the guy trained guys to roast coffee.
Yeah.
And then he sent them out with coffee roasting businesses. And one of the guys that when I found a new breed and came to America with it, one of the first guys in had been trained by that guy, because that guy was kind of whispered about like a legend in church planting circles. And one of my guys, he goes, "Oh yeah, that guy trained me." And it was so cool to like meet a guy and to see how versatile and missional this guy was. But Paul didn't want his guys. They were going to have enough hardship. They were going to go to prison. They were going to be hungry. They were going to be naked at times because of persecution. But he wanted them to have the freedom to be able to go anywhere and sustain themselves, so that, like Paul said, I worked with my own hands so I wouldn't be a burden to the churches I was planting.
Well,
and that's what we're doing. We're doing both.
Yeah. So if you guys haven't heard before, the Bible Inner Circle, what we do is Peyton handles all the ministry training. Basically, any question you got, not just about church planting, but ministry, evangelism, dealing with staff in your church. I mean, literally, if it has to do with the ministry side, that's what Peyton handles. And when it has to do with how do I create an income stream, that's what I do. I teach people basically how to become a consultant, either a social media consultant or a full-blown consultant, which is what I do. Also, we teach them how to create online training programs. We just had a bunch of guys fly in last month, and we sat them down and showed them, here's everything. Literally, here's the blueprint. Now take this and go do it yourself. In fact, I got a Vox this morning from one of the guys, and he's like, hey, look over my stuff, because, I'm launching right now, and I need this thing to work. And that's what we do. So it really is, helping both sides of the equation. And interestingly enough, man, I got to share this because I was thinking about this last night. So we had one guy who was in for like a month, and then he sent me an email. Hey, Pete, you know what? My church has decided they want to keep me on full time, so I don't need to know the Bible stuff. And I'm like, hey, that's cool. There's no like contract or anything. You don't have to like stay in. So I'm like, dude, you're out. No problem. But here's the thing. And I was thinking about this. I go, but the problem is, what's going to happen after this church? What's going to happen when this church changes its mind or you get called somewhere else?
Yep.
The problem is, and I was thinking about this, if you don't have a marketable skill set, and I don't mean just any old skill set, like a skill set where you have to be employed by someone else, because that means then you got to search for a job. They have to be able to hire you, afford you, hire you, that kind of a thing. And I'm not saying someone has to learn to do what I do. I mean, I think there's plenty of guys who can be web designers, and I don't train on any of that stuff. Things like that you could do, but that's a skill set that really I say there's kind of like three main things. I'd say if you know how to do one of these three or all of these three, then you can write your ticket in life, meaning you can always make money. One is if you know how to market. If you know how to basically turn advertising into money, unlike everyone else who basically runs advertising and doesn't get any results, has no idea what it's going to do for them, blah, blah, blah. I mean, like, if you really know how to market, which is what I do. The second thing is if you know how to sell. Like, I know that's an evil term in the church circles. Oh, people sell stuff. Look, if you know how to sell, you can literally go get a job anywhere. because selling isn't contingent on you having a degree. It isn't contingent on anything. It's your ability to help people make a decision that's in their best interest. And if you have that ability, you can always go get a job somewhere because there's someone who needs something to be sold. And the third is if you know how to create what I refer to as joint venture partnerships, where basically someone's got an asset and someone else has a different asset and you join the two together. So I do this a lot. I know how to market. That's an asset to me. I've got clients who have client lists, but they don't know how to market to them. So I come in there and I glue the two together. I'm like, hey, let me take this marketing over here. Let me take your list over there. And I'm going to create money out of this. But those are skill sets that if you've got any one of those, and if you've got multiples of them, even better. But if you've got any one of them, you don't have to worry about what am I going to do if I get fired. And the reason why I bring this up, Peyton, is I was thinking about this last night. I was thinking specifically about this one guy who was like, oh, the church decided to keep me on full time. I'm like, that's awesome, man. I'm excited for you. And let's face it, what I do, like when we teach the social media stuff, that's not right for everybody. I'm totally cool with that. It may not be right for someone. Or the full-blown consultancy, which is even like way more work, but way more profitable, more work as far as learning is concerned. I get it. It may not be for everyone. I was thinking about this, though, in terms of my dad. So for those of you who are first-time listeners to the podcast, my dad was a pastor. And I grew up pastor's kid. Dad was a pastor until I was in high school. When I was in high school, the church, which is in the San Francisco Bay Area, had really, atrophied and started to die off. And basically, I didn't know this at the time because my parents never talked about money, but the church hadn't been able to pay my dad for like 3 months. And we had a medical emergency in the family. And my dad was like, I have to go do something else. I have to go do something else because I've got to bring in money. I have to take care of my family. That's my first priority. And long story short, my dad ends up becoming a teacher. Now, a lot of pastors, especially back in that day, a lot of pastors would have seen that as, you've given up on your calling, right? God called you to be a pastor. Pastors are full time. That's the deal. But here's the deal, man. My dad didn't quit ministry. He just wasn't a full-time pastor anymore. And he has always done ministry. He ended up eventually retiring from the school district where he's at, and gets pension, or I don't even know what school people get, whatever they got, right? But he never quit. Like he was known in the area. If you had to be out on vacation and you were a pastor and you need someone to fill in for you, you could call him and he'd fill in for you. And so he was constantly filling in for Baptist churches, Calvary Chapel churches. I don't even know what some of the churches were because he didn't care, right? He was like, right, look, this is what God's called me to be, is to be a minister, and I'm not full time. Right. And he never went back to full time ministry. But here's the punchline, guys. I was talking with a pastor, a mega church pastor that you and I both know, Peyton. This is a few years back. And somehow we got on the subject, and I'm like, yeah, my dad, he's was a pastor all my life, and he just retired from the school district, and now he's still doing ministry, and now he's just got more time to do ministry because he's got pension coming in. And the pastor goes, wow, at that age, that's about the time I'd start to think about retiring. And my comment was, I go, well, and I just was repeating what my dad had said. My dad goes, my goal is to go out in a blaze of glory. Like his goal isn't to retire from ministry. That's what he's been called to do. He's going to do that till his dying breath. But here's my point. I know I just went on a tirade, which is usually what you do.
Did,
I know.
But that's okay.
No,
hey, it's more church planning talk earlier on in our podcast than normal, so that's good.
Well, it's good stuff though. But here's the thing, man.
It is.
He said, I'm thinking, at that age, I'm going to be retiring. Isn't that what we see for jobs, right? Yeah. Even if it's full-time ministry, at one point, I'm finally going to get away from all of this. I don't have to listen to people bicker and complain. I get to one day retire. It's like this light at the end of the tunnel. It's the end of the rainbow that we're going for. That's what we've turned full-time ministry into. Not that that's wrong to be in full-time ministry, but I do think there's a problem when we long for the day to retire because it's no longer ministry to us. It's a job. right? That's my point. That was my whole point in that whole tirade is
No, but you bring up a really good point, because there's what you're made for and what you're paid for. And, they're not always the same thing. So when people think, oh, I'm going to go retire, they're wanting to do like that thing that was their passion all their life. And here's the deal is Paul worked in the marketplace, and he didn't work full time, I don't believe. I think that he had done what we've talked about on this podcast so many times. He maximizes income for the minimal amount of time to free him up to do ministry.
Right.
Now, your dad wasn't able to do that, right? He wasn't entrepreneurial.
Interestingly enough, my dad is a way better salesman than I am. Like, because he's an extrovert and I'm not.
No way.
He at one point was this is why I just said long story short, but now I'm going to make it longer. He at one point got a job at a mortuary, and his job was to sell insurance to the people, and he was really good at it.
Right.
And the guy wouldn't hire him because he was a pastor. And so the guy was like just prejudiced against religious people in general, but especially because my dad was a pastor. He was like, I don't want to hire you. And so that's what caused him to look at something else. And he finally got into school, but in the school district. But he was really good at sales. And I would say he's probably far better at it, because for me, I have to force myself to talk to people because I'm such an introvert.
Right.
And for him, it's just natural. It's who he is. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's really cool, man. Well, the whole thing with the Bible Inner Circle, though, is that we're really trying to maximize the income. We don't want to see guys poor. And I know a lot of the deal was you watch your dad scraping by and working hard to provide for you guys. But, really in a way, I think that what we're talking about is guys being able to not always be behind the eight ball. Like, for example, I spoke to a guy that many of our listeners might know. He's a church planning trainer. He's an author. And he was just talking to me at why he became a consultant. And he was saying, because every month, at the end of that month, we were 10 to 20% behind our bills. And it just led to more debt. And like, for example, North American Mission Board, if you're in significant amounts of debt, they won't let you be a church planner, because they know what's ahead of you is you're going to be spinning multiple plates. But if you could walk in and say, look, I'm not dependent on the generosity of others. I'm not playing the cosmic crapshoot. I'm taking this into my own hands like Paul did. And I'm gonna work, but I'm gonna work strategically and I'm gonna work wisely. I'm not getting money for dollars. Dollars for hours. Right. I'm literally going to, which is one of the things you teach in this. One of the first things you teach people is like this mind shift. You've got to rethink your income, which maximizes you for ministry. That's what Paul did. I mean, a lot of I'm listening to it. I remember at one point calling you and saying, Pete, everything you're saying is what Paul did. It kind of was like a revelation, because I didn't know all the marketing stuff and the business consultancy stuff. And so for me, that was a real big takeaway, because for me, I'm always tracing things back to the first century. And but again, this planner, he goes, after 10 years of trying to climb out of debt and just getting further in it, he goes, I've been doing this for about 6 months. He goes, we're debt free.
Wow.
And that is a huge deal for me. Like seeing church planners, just that freedom now.
Yeah.
He's now free to go speak here and go do this. And he's free. He's not worried. And he goes, so much of the spiritual warfare that the enemy used to use that with and attack my family and attack my marriage. He goes, it's not even an arrow in his quiver anymore. It's literally freed us. He goes, I feel like I was talking to him and he sounded so good. You ever talk to people and they sound so good and you just tell that guy's in a sweet spot right now because he's doing what he's made for.
I imagine that's what it's like when you talk to me.
Well, that's what's funny. That's what's funny is for you, it's doing this. It's helping these church planners.
Yeah.
Because when we first talked, you were like, hey, man, I make lots of money and I'm really good at it. But this in ministry. And I think for you, being able to take the skill set and empower and train others.
I remember going through, for a lack of a better term, a midlife crisis. And I was going up to this event in Los Angeles with a buddy of mine. And we drove back. It was late at night, and we stopped off at a Denny's, and we were talking, and he goes, "Oh, you're going through a midlife crisis." And I go, "I know, but I think I finally found what I'm supposed to do." And he's like, "What's that?" I go, "It's all this church planner stuff that I'm starting to do." At the time, we were just starting the magazine, the podcast, and it was like for the first time in my life, I felt like I had direction. So, you know.
Yeah, it's cool. Well, hey man, how do now that we've talked, this was unplanned. I think we're just excited because we're constantly working on this stuff. And like I said, for me, I'm just cluing into how first century it is, and I'm super excited for these church planners because, you know, Bivo church planning is the future. If you're not aware of that, that is the future. It's the future in Europe. It's going to be the future here. The large sustainable, churches that are, hiring, those guys will always be around, but they will be far fewer in number in future. They do exist in Europe, but we have far fewer number of them and percentage of them. So it is a way of prepping for the future. And, Proverbs says that the wise man sees danger and hides himself. In other words, he preps for it. He knows what's coming down the pipe. And wisdom is that ability to look ahead. And not only that, it's not just about your security. It's also about your effectiveness. It's also about your reach. Like I said, here's the number one thing for me. I'm a serial church planner, and I can't move on. I devised a system for me to be able to leave a church like a trapeze artist, right? Where I'm holding on to one rung, but I'm grabbing for the other one at the same time. But so that is one thing. But again, that was only supplemented income. The reality is, for me, and I've talked to so many guys who are in churches they hate, or churches they feel they're not supposed to be in anymore, but they don't know where to go next. And so literally their calling is ahead of their finances. And they're like, well, I'm kind of stuck here because... And nobody really, it's so normal that nobody talks about it. Nobody, you get mad when you get an email from Pete, oh, you're just trying to make money off me. But nobody looks at the church as it is and goes, why are we going so slow? Obviously, it's tied to money and our income. Because I tell you what, in China and these other countries where they're not, they don't have as high of a lifestyle, they live in poverty and they accept poverty. The church is going like gangbusters, man, because they haven't tied it to their finances. So here's the deal. If you can divorce ministry from your finances, not saying you can't supplement from churches you plant. You should always take some kind of income from a church you plant. That's biblical and it's wise. But we live in a time right now where, like Europe and other parts of the world, you have to be wise. And so for me, it's more about the freedom. It's more about my mobility. It's more about my versatility. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah. Well, to that, all I have to say is...
I made my money the old-fashioned way. I got run over by a Lexus.
That's so good. I love having our sound effects back.
Oh, my gosh, dude. That was sent to me by Travis. He goes, hey, in honor of your new soundboard, here's your favorite clip. Because he actually sent that to me. It's from a show called Parks and Rec, and I never watched it. And I was like dying when I saw that. I was like, oh, that's beautiful.
I made my money the old-fashioned way. I got run over by a Lexus.
You just can't help but laugh when you hear that.
You know what's funny? Because there are some sound bites we have that I think they're funny because you think they're funny, and I get a kick out of you playing them. Like Mamma Mia. That's first time I didn't think it was funny, but when you're laughing so hard, it became funny, and now it's one of the funniest sound bites I think we have because it's like an old friend. But that one's actually funny.
Oh, dude, I'm telling you, it's hilarious, isn't it? Well, anyway, guys, if you want to know about Bivo Inner Circle, head on over to bivoinnercircle.com and check out the videos that we got there.
And tell them Peyton and Pete sent you. Because that felt like a giant commercial. Guys, we did not mean to barf a commercial all over you, but
No, my biggest advice, the takeaway that I want people to take from that is this. I don't care if it's our program or something else. You need to have a marketable skill set outside of ministry. And I would encourage it to be in one of those big three. If you can figure out how to put joint ventures together, another term for that is even being a broker, right? Because that's basically what a broker is. A broker takes a product and a person who wants to buy it and puts them together, right? If you can do that, if you can learn how to sell or know how to sell, or if you can know how to market, and when I say market, I mean if you know how to bring in buyers off of cold advertising. If you have one of those skill sets, you can write your ticket literally anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
Because all three of those are need. Anywhere in the world, people need those three. So,
yep. Absolutely.
Let's get down to the nitty-gritty.
All right. Man, I can't tell you how good it is to have our Delio back.
I did find some great classic sound effects like this one, which will be a good one for you.
Where's your robe?
It was stinky, but these are my recreation clothes.
Is that from me? Is that from the ones
expensive.
I sent you?
Thank you.
I love that. they look expensive. Thank you.
My favorite comedy ever.
I thought it was a horrible movie, but you and Charlie loved that stupid thing.
Oh my gosh, dude. Okay, so
wait,
Nacho Libre.
Here we go.
Chancho, when you are a man, sometimes you wear stretchy pants in your room. It's for fun.
We have to get into the topic, man. We can't do smack talk. See, everyone doesn't understand. We had to split up the podcast again, and so we're ready to do another half hour of smack talk.
I know. We should just do one and save it for a rainy day when we can't do smack talk. Just pull that smack talk out.
Hey. May it never be we can't do smack talk. May it never be.
Hey, take it easy. Hey, yeah, man. So, that movie is that's comedic gold. Like literally the opening song had me. I'm laughing out loud in the theater with the opening song. And I'm like, this movie's rad already. It has me. And it's a love affair.
I was wondering if you would like to join me in my quarters this night for some toast.
That is a line a church planter would use to pick up his future bride. Ruben, there you go.
Hey, that's a Bible study pickup line, man. People should get it. Or one of my favorites from that movie is, I am on deck guy duty. I am on cleaning duty, kitchen duty. I need a better duty. It's great. Come on. It's good stuff. He said duty. I was in the car yesterday and Liberty goes, she's listening to some movie or film and she's in the back seat and she goes, ha ha ha, Dad, they said duty. These are the moments you live for as a parent. Yes, I have raised you well.
Well, we're going to actually get into our topic now, guys. And of course, because we did talk the first half about Bivo Inner Circle, we do have this comment from Platinum Bivo Inner Circle member, Dan Sams.
Pete Mitchell loves you and has a plan for your bank account.
Just saying.
Yeah. Hey, who can argue with Dan Sams? He's a church planner.
There you go.
He's not a good one, but he's a church planner.
And this is after Dan Sams said this.
I read Peyton Jones more than I read Francis Chan.
Come on.
He actually added to that, and I think we had to take that part out, didn't we?
No, it's right here.
Recently, I stopped memorizing scripture and started memorizing passages of Church Zero.
Woo! Okay, I take back everything I said about Dan Sams. Blasphemous he may be, but a wonderful church planner he is.
I used to have more friends before I got into church planting.
Just remember, when you join the Bible Inner Circle, everything you say can and probably will be used against you.
Probably will be used on the podcast.
All right. Well, hey, getting into today's topic, which is everything I needed to know about church planning. I learned from Star Wars, and I actually did something very special for this one. I actually sent Pete notes ahead of time because I figured here's
the thing. You sent me the notes while we were doing Smack Talk, like I'm supposed to read what is otherwise a dossier on what we're going to talk about.
Hey,
bullet points, buddy.
It
Bullet
was a
points.
new idea. The muse took me suddenly, and I went with it, Pete.
Yeah,
I was
clearly,
inspired.
clearly, what I was sharing when I was pouring out my heart in Smack Talk, you were so uninterested. You wrote a dossier.
Actually, I think that's the time I listened to you the most when you were talking. I was actually glued to you this time. I thought what you were saying was amazing.
This time.
Yeah, this time.
This time I paid attention.
Pete, I am a bad listener, though. I am just a bad listener. I would be a much better evangelist if I listened to people better.
That's an interesting line.
It is.
I would
It
say
is.
let's unpack a bit. Let's relate that back to Star Wars.
But you know, funny enough, when I am sharing the gospel, I do actually gain the ability to listen better.
Nice.
That is actually kind of strangely true.
Nice. So let's actually move into our topic.
All right. Well, hey, let me just set this up with saying this. Every once in a while, I have to pinch myself that it's not 1984 and this has all been like an amazing dream. Like we're just, I'm going to wake up in my bed, 11 years old, like Bill and Ted, and go bogus because it's going to have not been real that every year we are treated to a new blockbuster Star Wars film. Like that's unheard of. Remember when we used to have to wait like 4 years and Darth at the end of Empire goes, I am your father. And if you did not grow up during that time, you don't remember that all the magazines and all the news, it was a big deal. Everybody's like, is it true? Or is Vader saying that to manipulate and trick Luke? And we didn't know. We had to wait 4 years to find it. And then once Luke believed it, we're like, oh, okay. I guess it's real. Seems like the movie thinks it is. So it must be real. And then we accepted it by the end of Jedi. But nobody really knew. And we had to wait 4 years to find out. That's suspense, man.
And this relates back to church planning. How?
Okay, I may have gone off. Okay, this has a little bit of a Surgeon General's warning that it's Star Wars and church planning. It's our two favorite things. We might just go on a tangent on one of those two. Maybe
What
both.
is thy bidding, my master?
So here's the deal. The reason I have this is I remember being in English class and we were studying epics. And I had the coolest English teacher ever because he was talking about Homer, the Iliad, the Odyssey, and then he kicks into Star Wars and he compares all the great epics of history with Star Wars. And he goes, it's an epic. Classic struggle between good and evil. One guy held in the cosmic balance, a reluctant hero who is giving, on and on, he's got this team of people, these characters. I think we've all heard that, like broken down, like King Arthur, same thing, reluctant hero, wizened old wizard Merlin who guides him. I mean, all these things are a part of an epic. And so, and Tolkien and Lewis came on the scene and they basically said, look, Lord of the Rings is an epic. Again, same thing, reluctant hero, Aragorn. I mean, a cosmic struggle between good and evil. Whenever you break down what an epic is something that resonates with people on a big scale. And Lewis and Tolkien came in and said the reason why is all of creation is caught up in an epic struggle between good and evil. And we are all reluctant heroes. And so on and on and on. There's this whole comparison. And Lewis and Tolkien both felt that they were cashing in on something that was eternal in the heart of man. And so when I say there are 5 things that Star Wars intrinsically taught me about church planning from a young age, I'm actually not joking. There are actually things that when I watched a Star Wars movie, I knew that were true. And so the first one, and hopefully, Pete, my plan for this is you and I will chat these through. This will not be a monologue because I have bullet points here. So the first one is you might get your arm cut off, right? You might lose a limb. You could actually get hurt doing this. And so
Don't
with an
do that.
in an epic struggle, basically what happens is often the hero, he sustains some wound or he gets something that happened to him. So here we are, we're watching, it's 1977. We're watching Star Wars. I'm 4 years old and dude gets his arm cut off in a movie. Now, prior to that, it had been The Little Engine That Could, it had been Captain Kangaroo, It had been Sesame Street, Electric Company. These were all the shows that I grew up watching. The 70s were crazy. If you don't know half those, Google them. But when you're watching a movie and a dude gets his arm cut off, that's pretty hardcore. And it wasn't until Empire that we're all watching, and then shock of shock, like Luke gets his hand cut off. I don't think people realize that was kind of a big deal when your main character, and particularly like the Golden Boy, Luke Skywalker, loses a limb. That's a big deal. And I think a lot of church planners and people that go into ministry, they have that same kind of shock when they realize that I could get hurt doing this. You know, people hurt you. You might get kicked in the teeth. You know, you might start out the Golden Boy and then end up very lonely and discouraged and frustrated, or someone might stab you in the back or attack you. And you know, the people that were your best friends in your church plant, you know, maybe the people that were your partners in your core team, they turn on you and you lose a limb, man. You get a hand cut off by someone close to you, or, you know, those are high stakes. And one of the things that scandalized me, I think, was at a certain point in ministry, I got hurt. And I was really angry at God about that. Like I always say that my pastoral heart got broken. I quit ministry. I was crushed. And there's that sense in Empire Strikes Back where Luke really gets his butt kicked by Vader. Like, there's no way he's going to win that fight. Gets his butt kicked, gets his hand cut off, you know, drops himself down an air chute.
Interestingly enough, you could actually relate that to the church planner who thinks, you know, let me at him. I can handle this. I got some training behind me. Look, I can lift the rocks. I'm really good now, you know? And then laid out, missing the hand, crying, going down trash.
Man, it was funny because when you said that, my mind went to the Seagull song. Lift tiny rocks with your special gift. But yeah, no, absolutely. And it goes back to something that you said about Rick Warren, where he said, you know, he doesn't trust a guy unless, you know, he's been hurt, you know. And I think failure to a certain degree is very sanctifying. You know, like if you think about Luke, right? He gets his butt kicked and he fails. And then he goes back and he studies, man. He studies. And
you know, interestingly enough, that, and I know this isn't where you're going with this, but I'm just going to say this, man. That is such an important business concept. I don't trust people in business who haven't failed. Like when they're like, oh, you know what? I've been doing this for 5 years and I've been successful right out the gate. And I'm like, dude, then come talk to me after you failed, because it's like it's a different game if everyone believes they're going to succeed, right? You believe God's called you to plant a church. You believe I'm going to succeed. God's called me to plant. Like, you wouldn't start it going, I believe I'm going to fail. You wouldn't do that. but the reality of the situation is going to hit you at some point. Wow, gosh, a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. And maybe you get your arm cut off. And the key for me is, will that person get back up? Right? Will they get back up and go back out after? And if they fail again or get the other arm cut off, will they still get back up? You know, it's just a flesh wound. You know, will they do that or not?
Yeah, and sometimes it may not be like, just like you said about business venture. Gary Vaynerchuk often talks about young entrepreneurs. They watch all the YouTube videos, they listen to all the podcasts, and they come in talking the game. You know, oh, I'm a venture capitalist and I'm this and that. And he goes, the problem is you think you can write a biography at 25 years old because you think you're great. And he goes, the problem is you haven't lived yet. Yeah. And it's the same in this. Like, there is so much to learn. And sometimes those times where God really lets you struggle and lets you I remember times being like literally flat on the floor in my office, just crying out to God because, you know, things weren't popping and stuff wasn't going anywhere. That desperation is a holy thing. That being just at the end of yourself, I think in many ways is what God often waits for in us. When I hear church planners are like, oh yeah, blah, blah, blah. Everything's good. Everything's wonderful. Everything's fantastic. Look at you're like, everything's not good. Everything's not fantastic. And it's that whole idea of fake it till you make it. And, kind of like you said about, those people that fail, it may be the church plant that never takes off. And that experience kind of lets you know, like you said, I'm not as good as I thought I was. And it's really not about how good I am. It's not, obviously there are things in church planting, your leadership skill can be improved, your ability to communicate the gospel and hone your gift. Those things are realities, but it may not be about that. It may be that you are coming to the end of who you are so that you can start with who he is and start experiencing his power. My favorite church planting stories are the ones where the guys give up and then something pops. And I don't know how many interviews I've had on Hardcore, and you'll remember some of these, Pete, where they tell that story, where nothing was happening. They're like, so I started praying, or I started having prayer meetings with my people, and we don't know how to explain it, but this one guy came in, he got saved. He brought a couple more people the next week. And, they can't explain it other than to say that suddenly something started happening. And it wasn't that they did X, Y, or Z. Lee Iacocca said it this way. He goes, he said, no, failure is the only thing that teaches you anything. Nobody ever learns anything from success.
Wow.
And so like when a church planner gets a big church without any kind of struggle, or like he does the big launch, he does the critical mass, I'm with you. I feel the same thing. Like, I don't trust you, because it's kind of like an oak tree where what I'm seeing above the ground is really big, but the root system isn't there. If you know anything about an oak tree, the root system is a mirror image of what's above the soil. So there's a mirror image of that entire giant tree under the soil to hold it up. And that's what happens during this time. Your roots are growing to sustain through that struggle. And by the way, if you know anything about an oak tree, it's the strength of the wind that blows on it that determines the size of the tree. So it's genetically wired into an oak tree that as the wind blows and it gets that resistance and tension, it's wired into its DNA that it says, oh, I need to grow bigger.
That's so funny, because when I was studying horticulture, I actually thought it. Never mind. I'm just.
Yes, that would be awkward. Just remember, I read.
You do.
So hey, what's the next point, Pete?
I don't know. What is your next point?
I sent you the notes. I never get to say that,
dude. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. What am I supposed to do with this?
Okay, so second point, there is a dark side of ministry. So when you're watching Star Wars, it's so cool that Jedis have this constant temptation to go to the dark side. And
at least that it's
ministry.
Acknowledged.
What's that?
That it's acknowledged.
Yeah.
Like, I think the dark side is always there as an option, but it's acknowledged in the Jedis.
Mm-hmm.
And in ministry, I think a lot of times they pretend that it doesn't exist.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like, so for example, in the faith movement, you see it that when the guy's like super wealthy and, he's flying around in his private jet and Rolls Royce, it's that I have enough faith. That's why God has blessed me. And, when you hear the testimony of guys who went down the dark path, which, here's the thing. We all know it. Like, we all know that temptation and pull. You can't look at guys whose ministries, by the way, guys, the number one thing that I think you need to remember when it comes to ministers failing is that could be you. If you ever lose sight of that, you're in trouble, right? Because, let he who thinks he stands take heed lest he falls. There is no benefit in thinking, oh, that'll never be me. There is every benefit in saying, ooh, that guy went down. Ouch, man. He's probably a better leader than I am. He's probably a that idea of, wow, I need to every day be saying, Lord, lead me not into temptation. That is a daily thing. Jesus said, you need to be praying that, but deliver us from evil. There is this constant struggle. But anyways, going back, the number one thing that these guys will say is they'll say, all of the I got bored, over time, I just got bored with the same thing. And they wanted, ministry became something that it wasn't. It became about security and luxury and comfort. As things got successful, and they got more power, it became a harder, they got into this ease and this pattern of comfort, and it became about them. Became about them on stage, became about people talking about how great they were. It became about ego. And then after enough people were saying, you're so great, you're so great. And at home, your wife's going, you're still the knucklehead I've always known you to be. And I don't buy that. And I see right through that. And, yeah.
Yeah.
There is a dark side. And it's seductive.
There is. I mean, we've talked about that so many times on this podcast that when you're up there on stage preaching, the two things that are pulling you, ego and impact. And that ego leads to the dark side.
Yeah,
the ego
absolutely.
becomes too big.
Unpack that a bit for our people, because
we've
been talking about that since the early days.
You can't help but have people staring at you, and there not to be an ego effect, right? I don't care if there's 5 people in the audience, 50, 500, 5,000. There's an intoxication that comes from being in front of the room. Now, not everyone has that. I mean, they don't. How do I put this? It's there no matter what. But I mean, not everyone seeks it. Like, so many people are afraid of public speaking, and for a lot of pastors, they might even start out that way, that they don't like public speaking, but then they kind of get used to it. And there's hey, everyone's listening to me. They're all hanging on every word that I say, every story that I tell. I made them laugh today. That's cool. There's an ego thing that goes on with that.
Yeah.
And the point that we've always made on the podcast that you really spelled out is the problem is when the ego becomes bigger than the impact. You're more concerned about, connecting with the audience, making them laugh, things like that, than actually impacting the audience.
Yeah.
Helping them either realize the sin in their life or the need for God, or, whatever it might be. That's where the problem is. And, as your church grows and that stage becomes bigger and bigger, man, I'm telling you, man, it's seductive. And I know this because I speak for a living. I mean, I speak in front of groups all over the country. That's what I do. There's absolutely an ego thing that comes with it.
Yeah, there totally is, man. And then, and it's not that being popular is a problem. I always, I was blown away when I saw that scripture at the back of 2 Corinthians where Paul goes, and then there's our brother who has been made famous by his preaching of the gospel. And I was like, whoa. And he's talking about Apollos there, because he was the evangelist who came through after, well, I would say it's Apollos. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't say who it is, but you kind of do the math and figure he's talking about Apollos. But because he writes, in 1 Corinthians, I follow Paul, I follow Apollos, I follow Peter. But thing is that and Apollos was an evangelist. But you kind of get the impression that Paul doesn't have a problem with the fact that he's such a well-loved evangelist, kind of like a Billy Graham. Billy Graham's kept his nose clean, and he would be an example of a guy who got very famous and popular, but just seemed to walk that straight and narrow. Like, I think Billy Graham is worthy of every bit of respect that people pay him. And same with Rick Warren. I was at the U2 concert in the Rose Bowl. Now, when U2 plays and fills the stadium, they play 4 nights in a row there. It's arguably the biggest concert U2 ever does. And in that concert, he gave a shout out to Rick Warren. I think, did I mention this on the podcast already? That he mentioned about Chris Cornell, his suicide, guy from Audio Slave. And then Rick Warren or Bono goes, and by the way, he's talking about what a waste of life it was. And then he goes on to say, but, thankfully there are people like Rick Warren. Want to give him a shout out tonight. He's here. Appreciate the work you do for those that are tempted by suicide. And I'm like, dude, what kind of influence is that when you're in a stadium and the biggest concert by arguably one of the top 3 biggest bands in the world right now, and he gives you as a minister of the gospel a shout out for the work you're doing to help people not take their lives? That's radical. I was just like, wow, I just looked around the stadium and went, that's incredible, and that is not wrong. That is literally, that's what we ought to be known for, is helping people. Oh, nothing like professionalism. So the second one, there is a light side and a dark side of ministry. And then the third one is that turning to the dark side may get you faster results. I mean, that is the temptation of the dark side. The whole time you're watching the Star Wars saga, particularly in Jedi, right? You're watching Jedi, and Darth Vader is tempting him. I always think this is strange because, what's going to happen? Darth Vader's tempting Luke to the dark side, give in to your anger. But when he does it, he's going to kill Vader. He could have killed Vader right there, right when he turns to the dark side, and he starts whooping up on Vader, and Vader's like, up against the barrier. He cuts Vader's arm off again, and then he realizes, oh my gosh, he looks down at his own hand and realizes, I've just become him. I'm going to become him if I keep doing this, and so I think that what happens in ministry is that there are a bunch of compromises, really small compromises that you start off making. Years ago, there was a movie called A Simple Plan, and it was of Bill Paxton. May he rest in peace. Game over, man. But
that's
Bill Paxton.
That's a sound clip I wish I'd had right then. It's so bad.
We have that. We overplay that so much.
And I gotta find it.
But yeah, I mean, Bill Paxton, he plays this guy. I think he's like a plumber or something stupid, electrician, just normal job. And a plane goes down somewhere in Michigan, North Michigan in the winter. And whole thing, Billy Bob Thornton plays his brother, and they're out hunting, and they find this plane full of money. And they're like, oh, we can't tell the cops, they'll take it all, think of what we could do. And they're like, no, we can't. That's illegal. And they're like, but look, and they find a little bit of drugs, and they're like, well, this is illegal money. This wasn't stolen. Like, this belongs to drug lords. We could just not tell anybody. Just don't tell anybody for 24 hours. It's all. Let's just think it. Let's sleep on it. And it becomes one small compromise. And by the end of the movie, it's led to murder. It's led to, it's terrible what it leads to. But what the movie tells you, the whole point of the movie is to tell you that the things they end up doing, they would have never done at that first juncture. It took the small compromises. And so if you think of it as a string of the alphabet, they would have never gone from, say, A on their morality, their starting point, to maybe, Q. But once they went to B, wasn't that big of a step to go to C. Once they're at C, they kind of had to do D. And then E was necessary to cover up D. It was like, eventually they end up deeper and deeper and deeper. And it's really sobering. And it's exactly how sin works. And again, there's an example of a movie communicating a spiritual truth that you go, wow, that was really instructive. Thank you, Lord, because I watch movies with my, with my Jesus brain in, my God goggles, I don't know what to call it, with my soul. Watch movies with my soul.
So what's the third point?
That was a third. Turning to the dark side.
What's the fourth?
Might get you faster.
What was the second?
Results. There's a light side and a dark side of ministry.
Okay. All right. So what's the fourth one?
So let's recap. First off, you might get hurt. You might
do
lose
a mid-show recap.
A mid-show recap. You might lose a limb. We're actually probably not going to get through all 5 of them. We'll do part 2 next.
Oh my gosh, I hate you pastors with your let's string this on for the next 17 weeks.
That's great. It's Star Wars. Come on, we could talk about this for weeks.
Could you shut up and give us some money?
Yeah, baby. So second one is there's a dark side of ministry, and you need to resist it. And number 3, turning to the dark side might get you faster and better results. And that's the seduction of it, So for example, I can remember this in my church plant. And Pete, you'll know this, right? Like you and I talk about this we talk about it in marketing, right? You and I will sometimes talk and I'll be like, hey, should we email these guys? And you're like, no, that's spam. And I'm like, yeah, but like these people need to know. And you're like, no, they didn't sign up for this. We had their emails, but we got it through this. We didn't get it through this. And they don't want to hear about that. And I think in every part, including ministry, there are ways you can get faster results. You can manipulate people, but they're not going to be things that are going to sustain you or make the quality of what you do better. So Luke could have beat Darth Vader, but the price he pays in the end is not going to be worth it. So when you start cutting corners or you start bypassing, for example, you're like, oh, I'm going to get the biggest and best worship band. What if worship doesn't happen after that? What if real worship doesn't happen? Like there's all these things that you always as a spiritual leader have to be considering. Am I going to remain a Jedi or am I going to go down the dark path? And that temptation is always there.
I say just be a smuggler.
Oh yeah, baby. Trusty blaster at my side.
Bounty hunter, smuggler, something like that.
Hey, ancient hokey religions are no substitute for a trusty blaster at your side.
Oh, I wish we had our sound bites that had all of those. You gave me literally 26 Star Wars ones because on my soundboard had different. I had to go to different pages in the soundboard to be able to play them all.
Did you find my treasure trove of quotes?
No. All I found was Beavis and Butthead.
To you. Post haste, my good man. I will send it to you. So those are the first 3 points, and we don't have time for the rest. Maybe we won't come back to it, but I enjoyed that.
It was actually a really enjoyable podcast, at least for me. You let me talk.
You got to talk a little bit.
I still remember this one hardcore that we did. Ruben comes up to me at church and he goes, yeah, I totally forgot you were on the podcast till the very end when you asked the fight question.
That's rad.
I'm like, I know. You feel my pain. You understand my trials and tribulations.
It's not easy being my friend. It's not easy being your friend, though. I think that's why we get along so well.
It's not easy doing a podcast with you. That's all I'm saying.
No, that's true. That's true. But hey, well, guys, hey, Pete, you know what Luke wasn't good at? Math. He was terrible at keeping the books. The Rebel Alliance, someone had to be doing all the accounting for that. And Mon Mothma, she knew how to delegate.
How exactly did Mon Mothma do that?
Well, she got a hold of simplifiedchurch.com, where they took care of all of her bookkeeping needs.
Even though they were just a Rebel Alliance?
Absolutely. You see, they operate using the power of the Force, and that is far superior to your trusty blaster at your side. It's going to let you down. You can't deflect lasers with that. The IRS lasers coming in, pating, pating. You got to be able to bounce those bad boys back.
Could you shut up and give us some money?
Yeah. So, how would someone who might be a pastor, might have workman's comp issues, payroll issues, parsonage issues, IRS issues, how would they contact simplifiedchurch.com?
Well, they would use their Jedi Holocron device to go to simplifiedchurch.com, and they would kick that little bad boy into hyperspace and immediately make the jump to joining simplifiedchurch.com.
I love it.
Yeah.
So basically,
there you go. May the Force be with you always.
So basically, all they got to do is reach out to Josh Henry over there at simplifiedchurch.com.
Yeah. Yeah, he will be your new master, and you will be his apprentice.
What is
There's only-
thy bidding, my master?
Always two there are. Josh
Let's get
and
down
the
to the
church
nitty
planner.
gritty. Let's get down to the nitty gritty.
I love it.
All right, guys. Well, hey, thanks for listening today. We enjoyed doing this podcast. Whether or not you enjoyed listening to it is a whole nother story. But thanks for joining us. And this has been the Church Planner Podcast with Pete Mitchell and Peyton Jones, reminding you, if you want to reach the ones no one's reaching, you need to go where nobody's going and do what nobody's doing.
Thanks for joining us for another weekly episode of the Church Planner Podcast with Pete Mitchell and Peyton Jones. We'd love to hear your comments on this episode of the Church Planner Podcast. Visit us online and let us know what you thought at churchplannerpodcast.com. If you subscribe to us via iTunes and have enjoyed the podcast, leave us a positive review. The more positive reviews we receive in iTunes, the more iTunes will promote us to other church planners who would benefit from this show. This podcast is brought to you by the Church Planner Magazine, which is available in the iTunes newsstand or online via churchplannermagazine.com.